On page 838 is Parshas Chukas. It begins with the red heifer, the burning of the red heifer for the purpose of purification. The theme of that section is the idea that there is impurity when there is a corpse, indicating that there's a tremendous amount of sanctity when there's a life. Meaning, impurity, tumah, is always the byproduct of the departure of kedusha. So, when we have a section that deals with the impurity that is the byproduct of a death, it clearly indicates and is clearly supposed to inspire us that when a person is living, there is sanctity. There are different levels of sanctity. There's a higher level of sanctity if it's a Jewish person, and therefore the tumah is on a higher level. A Jewish corpse has the ability of transferring impurity even without actual contact. If you are under the same roof of a Jewish corpse, so there is a transfer of tumah, and therefore in a funeral home you have a designated room for the kohanim where they do not enter over even an overhang that is connected to the structure itself. The Jew has the ability. Now, why does the tumah spread to such an extent? Well, that's because the sanctity of the Jewish life is so great that it can have an impact even without direct contact. The non-Jew has tumah as well, but the tumah of the non-Jew, according to most authorities, is only if you actually touch it, and therefore the roof issue, the idea of a transfer being under the same roof, does not apply, indicating that yes, the non-Jew has the ability of inspiring, of connecting, has the ability of making a difference, but the impact is much less. That's the main theme, but I want to move immediately to page 842, to the section, to the portion of the passing of Miriam, and you have to realize that suddenly when you begin chapter 20, verse 1 on page 842, you are no longer having a discussion of the first years of the wilderness, but rather we have fast forward to the last year. And this is taking place as they are indeed preparing themselves to enter Eretz Yisrael. So in Parshas Korach, a week ago, we were in year 1-2. Now we are the last year in the wilderness. Keep that in mind. Vayavo bnei Israel. So bnei Israel come, kol ha'edah, the whole assembly, to Midbar Tzin, to the wilderness of Zin, b'chodesh harishon, and this is the first month of the last year they are going to be spending in the wilderness. The following year, 10 days later, they're going to be crossing. Vayeshev ha'am beKadesh. Now, if you read carefully, you will realize that when the verse talks about the arrival mentioned that everyone, the Bnei Yisrael, come, the children of Israel. But when we are told that some people settled, it was ha'am, a group of people, ha'am, and we don't call them Am Yisrael. And usually that indicates trouble. When you call Jews without Israel, when the Jewish people view themselves as a nation, like any other nation, and we don't realize that we are the nation of God, or the nation of Israel, but we want to be like any other nation, it calls for trouble. When policies of a country, of a Jewish country, of a Jewish state, are based on this view that we are like anyone else, and they're going to accept us like anyone else, and just as in any region in the world, if all you need to do is compromise, and then the world will accept you and love you, and that's how you settle issues, and it could work in Northern Ireland, it could work in other regions of conflict. If you take that approach that we are just another you're asking for trouble. That's what's taking place here. So already you realize that something's going to go sour here. In addition, Vayeshev, usually in the wilderness, they traveled Vayachanu. Lachanot is to station somewhere. And when you stop at a tachana, you don't want to live in a tachana merkazit. You don't want to live on a station. You're settled there until the next bus leaves. That's what occurred throughout the years in the wilderness. Vayasu vayachanu. Here, suddenly, what takes place is we have the group of people that Vayeshev, they felt settled, indicating that they were closer to civilization, and some of them viewed themselves as settled people here. Keep in mind, we're going to run into trouble here, but Vatamat Sham, Miriam passes away, and she dies. Fine. The next verse, without time to even mention that they mourn, nothing. V'lo haya ma'im la'ida. Immediately after Miriam's passing, the people start panicking because they have no water. And they gather and they approach Moshe and Aaron with a fair claim, in essence, because you do need water. So the rabbis tell us, and even those who in general appreciate Pshuto Shel Mikra, the simple reading of the text, note that there's a connection between the passing of Miriam and the water crisis. What's the connection between the two? Because in the merit of Miriam, they had water throughout the years in the wilderness. How did they survive in the desert without water? Right? Is a question that everyone must ask. So we have the tradition of some kind of stone that traveled with them. There's a rabbinic tradition that the stone itself that traveled with them settled in the Yamash Shel Tveria, in the Sea of Tiberias. That's some kind of rabbinic tradition that exists. And up until this day, you go to the Golan, there are places where you see people praying, and they are facing the Kinneret because of this tradition. Something interesting, you could do a search on it. They found something, some sonar discovered some kind of large object under Tiberias Sea. So this is your own, you could do your own research on what it signifies, but as you can imagine, already Jews are buzzing that they found Be'er Shel Miriam. Yes, yes, no, no. I think we'll survive as a nation either way. Now, so they attack Moshe, we need water. And they attack with the bitterness, and they say it would have been better for us to die in as the earlier generations did. Verse 4, Velama havetem, why did you bring us? Why did you bring the Kahal Hashem? Why did you bring the congregation of Hashem to this wilderness for us to die with our animals? You, Moshe and Aaron, it was you. There's bitterness towards Moshe and Aaron here. And why did you take us out of Egypt? You brought us to an area at the end of verse 5. There's no way, we cannot plant here. There's no figs, there's no grapes, there are no pomegranates. It's interesting that you talk about the fruit of the 7 grains. What are the fruits of the seven species that the land of Israel has been blessed with? So we have Eretz, so let's do Chitas Zarar are grains. Gefen, Te'ena, Rimon, Zait, and Dvash. Now, Zait, oil, Dvash, honey. And it said that the man was Tamo Kilashad Hashemin, had a flavor, the man had a flavor of oil, high unsaturated fats, and it tasted like it's a pichet bedvash. So it had its honey, and it had its oil, the man. So what were the 3 fruits missing? Fruits that they were promised you will see in the land of Israel. Which ones were missing from the man? Tena, Gefen, Rimon. So therefore they make reference to that. Where's the Tena, Gefen, and Rimon? We have the Shemen, we have the Dvash, but where's that? But they complain. And they approach Moshe Rabbeinu. So number one, what we walk away with from this paragraph is that they have water in the merit of Miriam, and now they attack and they claim, Lama havetem, why did you bring us here? Now they're not complaining against God for the fact that they're present at that location, but they seem to be blaming Moshe Rabbeinu. Next paragraph, verse 7. Vaydaber Hashem Moshe lemor, Kach et hamate, go ahead and take the staff. Vehakel et ha'edain, go ahead and gather the flock. You and Aharon, v'dibartem el hasela, and go speak to the rock. We Jews have a tradition of speaking to rocks and to walls, and that's what we have done. Le'eineihem, be sure that they observe. The nation should watch, meaning don't just produce water for them. Be sure that what is done and it is watched. I want this to be a show. I want them to see. It will have an impact on them. Le'eineihem. And the result is going to be v'natan meimav. I guarantee that the rock will give its waters, and they're going to drink, and everyone will drink, the nation and the animals. So far, so good. Vaikach Moshe tamateh. Moshe goes ahead and listens to God, and he takes the staff, Melifnei Hashem, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu did not have this staff at home. He was not walking around with his staff. Throughout the years in the wilderness, whenever he taught, remember, we fast forward some 38 years. Do not picture Moshe addressing the nation standing on a rock, as Charlton Heston did. Do not envision him walking around with a staff always, as Disney presented him. Is good old Moshe speaking to the nation of Israel. Specifically here, he had to go ahead and get the staff. The staff from where? Melifnei Hashem, that was kept before God. And verse 10, everyone gathers. And then Moshe Rabbeinu turns to them and he says, Shimuna, verse 10, well-known words, listen carefully, you Hamorim. Listen, O you rebels. Listen, O you rebels. Haminasela hazeh, do you think that it is natural to bring forth water from this rock? You think so? Vayarem Moshe yado, he raises his arm, he struck the rock. We're all yelling at him, no, no, no. Last year we learned how much harm it happened. Don't do it. And he does it not once, but twice. And there's a lot of water. Fine, everyone drinks, happy ending, the nation survived. Next brief paragraph, Vayomer Hashem Moshe Aaron, guess what? Ya'an, this is verse 12, since lo he'emantem, you did not believe in me. What? They didn't believe in him. What they do is to hit a rock. I mean, my goodness. Ya'an lo he'emantem bi, lahakdisheni le'nei bnei Israel, you did not sanctify me in front of the congregation. Remember, everyone was looking. All cooking, right? Everyone's looking. So therefore, lachen lo taviu et hakahal hazeh, you will not bring the congregation to the line that I have given them. And we're scratching our head, and commentators have been scratching their head for 3,000 years. What did he do? I mean, the poor, the rock was Michael, right? The rock was able to survive it. The nation drank. There was a miracle there. Give us a break. Like, what's happening here? We've been struggling with it. And we are told that these are the waters of strife. That Bnei Yisrael Ravu, brothers of Meriva, Asheravu Bnei Yisrael. Okay.
When Miriam was alive, did she use a rock? Did they have water from a rock? Or?
So it seems to be, as long as she is arrived, they had what they called a Ma'ayan Hamid Galgel. A Ma'ayan, some kind of river that rolled with them. And there's actually a song that relates to this Mayan. Later on in this week's Parsha, if you look carefully, there's a Shira. And you turn to page 852. Keep your place on the 840s. And we are told, Az Yashir, this is verse 17, the people of Israel, Az Yashir et Ashira Azot. It's very similar to Az Yashir Moshe. But this time Moshe was kept out because this well, this water source, didn't work so good for him. So we keep him out of the picture. And they sing about the bear, Ali Be'er, come up this well, Enula, and respond to it. In other words, that's how a shira was done. The shira was, there's a chorus, and then they would sing some other things and return to the chorus. Enula, respond to it. One of the commentators notes that the word enu comes from the word tsnu'ah. What's a tsnu'ah? Movement. And what they were singing was they were actually praising this rock, this source of water, because it was unique, that it had movement. It traveled with them throughout the wilderness. In whose merit, the rabbis teach us, again, not that she did anything, but due to the righteousness of Miriam, they had water. But of course, we're supposed to analyze what Miriam is about and realize in what ways and how that manifests itself in having a rock for the nation, what lesson we could learn, and what went wrong here. And the key word, of course, is mar. Mar is the key word. If you return to this portion that just read, mar is bitter. Bitterness. There's bitter waters at times, and there are bitter people at times, and there are times that we have bitterness when we think that things are unfair. Right? Moshe is a leader, we're not. We're a little bit bitter about it. I want to be the leader. The leader, not the leader. And not even Freudian, I hope. And so he tells them, Mar. So number one, Miriam is a person who has the ability of overcoming bitter situations. Let's return to, let's visit her life again. A 6-year-old girl, according to tradition. Her younger brother is hidden in the Nile. It seems like the end of his life, and she had such hope for him. She had hope for the young boy. She has hope for him, that he's the leader, he's the answer for our problems.
She also got her parents together.
She got her parents together, which is correct, and that's again a situation of bitterness. They separate. She says, you know what, you have to come together. The situation is indeed bitter, but you have the responsibility of moving forward despite the bitterness of the situation. It is mar at times. Yes, things are bitter, but that doesn't stop us from moving forward, of believing that better times are ahead, and to somehow see the good even now in what's taking place. So she stands. She sees the daughter of Pharaoh coming and taking the child. She thinks that the kid's going to be identified as a Jewish boy immediately. She goes ahead and she actively gets involved. So often in life there are circumstances that make us want to just freeze in our place. We are overwhelmed. We feel we can't move. Right? We feel that the circumstances are such that we just want to lay in bed or sit on the couch and just let things happen because we don't have the energy to overcome it. She symbolizes a person. Yes.
Is there any connection between Mar and Miriam, like the root of her?
That is the key of the root, that she is the one that deals with bitterness. But she guides us how to deal with bitterness. In other words, she confronts bitterness. Some people ignore bitterness. The person who can't function due to circumstances, which happens to all of us, that we feel like these big rocks that we can't move. But she has the ability to move forward. Yes, it is bitter. She is Maryam, and the circumstances are bitter. She could go ahead and move forward. And that's why when they sing later a song about the well, it was a be'er, it was a rock, according to tradition, but it had enu, ayin, nun, vav, it had tznuah, it had movement, the ability to move. And that's inspirational, that you have a person that could go ahead and say the circumstances are overwhelming. Naturally, I would believe that it's impossible to function. Nevertheless, I have movement, I have the ability to confront it. And she was that inspiration. That's what that name symbolizes. Circumstances will overwhelm, I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with a child held by the daughter of the king. I'm going to confront it. I'm going to deal, I'm going to negotiate with her. And she inspired the nation to not just sing about the future, but to sing about the present. If you look back at the Shira, Az Yasher Moshe Nezrot Ashira Zot, the people of Israel sang a song. And they sang, Ashira la Hashem, Ki Ga'aga, Go'oga'a, right? Ashira, in the future tense. One day, we will sing wholeheartedly to God. That's what the nation sang. But if you look at the end of the Shira, Miriam and the women adjusted the words. They did not say Ashira. What did they say? Shira, I will sing now. I don't need to, even though now things are still not ideal, I have the ability of overcoming the challenge. I have that Miriam personality, that things are mar, but you know what? Yes, we can. We'll have the ability to overcome. Now, one of the commentators notes that if you look at the crisis that takes place after her passing, they had lost Miriam. They lost that inspiration to deal with the bitterness. So she dies, there's no water, but they also are lacking that person. They are lacking the personality to confront it. So they start to panic because they don't have a Miriam. So immediately there's no water, and there's bitterness towards Moshe. Why did you do this? You took us here, Moshe. You brought us here to this place. So back to page 842, to verse 4. Moshe, there's no water here. We don't know how to deal with these circumstances. Lama havetem, why did you bring the people, the assembly of God, to this place to die? They were all negative. They believed that Moshe Rabbeinu made his own decisions, and crisis time. There's nothing here to survive. So now, the Ribono Shel Olam in verse 7 says we have to fix this problem. We have to go ahead and fix this problem with the mar, the bitterness that they have. how is it dealt with? So some commentators, the Rashbam notes that the staff used by Moshe was the staff that in last week's Parsha blossomed. Remember, there was a rebellion against the family of Aaron, claiming that he took the position unfairly. So he gave a staff. They placed it in the holy Mishkan, in the tabernacle, and his staff blossomed. And the Torah notes, so let's look back to just remember the words of the Torah, page 830. Page 830. So what happened there? They go ahead, each one of the tribes, on verse 21, Moshe spoke to the children of Israel. It's in 831. And all their leaders all the leaders should give him a staff, one for each leader. Verse 22, Moshe laid their staffs before Hashem in the tent of testimony. On the next day Moshe came to the tent of testimony, and behold, the staff of Aaron of the house of Levi had blossomed. It brought forth blossoms, sprouted a bud, and almond ripened. Moshe brought out all their staff from before Hashem, and he placed them there. And in verse 25, and now let's switch to the Hebrew. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe. So God says to Moshe, Hashem et Matei Aaron, put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony. So in this week's portion, we are told that he takes a staff from in front of God. So writes the Rashbam, the staff he used this week's portion was that staff that blossomed. Even though it was Aaron's, they switched things around. They got along well, they share. Lemishmeret, as a safekeeping, as a sign. Leot, who is it going to be a safekeeping? Who is it going to be a sign for in the future? Libnei, for people of Mary. Mary, not Mary. Bitterness, right? For people of bitterness. People that walk around with bitterness. And by the way, often we are bitter about, we see people who succeed. We did, they did. And what we really have to remember is that you succeed when you are shaked, when you are diligent. The word diligent in Hebrew is shaked. Shaked is also the word for the almond. And therefore, you're supposed to go ahead and take the staff of almonds and tell them, you're bitter due to circumstances. Remember that you achieve in life if you are diligent, if you are committed to your project. If you don't give in, the almond staff, that's what we are told here, Livnei Mary. So now, the Mary staff, the one that fights bitterness, back to us, to page 842, was the one that was supposed to be presented in front of the people. He walked around with the staff and he said, you people are bitter? You claim that things are unfair. We took you here in an unfair way. The circumstances are unfair. This staff signifies that it's not so. God's with us, right? A miracle occurred with the staff. Fine. But we really have to address the great crisis. I think we understand the relationship between Miriam, the relationship between her and the events that took place, how she was an inspiration. She's lost. We lose her inspiration. Fine. But let's analyze the big to-do. He's told to take the staff, and he goes ahead and you imagine if I'm supposed to take a staff with me, I'm supposed to hit. He does it, and he is told, you did not sanctify me. Moshe, you did not sanctify me. You cannot bring the people of Israel into their nation. What was it all about? So now, I'll share with you an insight that a few commentators note, and the main theme is, it is force versus word, but let me clarify what's taking place here in a few more words. Shamshin Raphael Hirsch, we've all heard of him. A German rabbi, a rabbi that the philosophy that so many of us here in North America are familiar with, that we have this balance of being familiar with the world around us, encounter the world, engage with the world, and yet remain committed to Torah, are following, in essence, the Hirschian philosophy. Hirsch was a great Torah scholar. Shamshin Raphael Hirsch was a Torah scholar. He was a good darshan. He had fascinating insights into Chumash. And he had a few teachers that inspired him. One of them was a rabbi by the name of Chacham Yitzchak or Isaac Barnes. Chacham Barnes. Chacham Barnes did not leave too much in writing, but he was well respected in the first half of the 19th century, and he produced great scholars like Rav Hirsch. So he shares with us in this week's Parsha an insight by Chacham Barnes to understand what exactly was the big to-do, what exactly was this sin of Moshe Rabbeinu for hitting instead of talking. What's the big deal? So, what Chacham Barnes is really telling us is the following, that you should know, when you want to have an impact on a crowd, when you want to have an impact on a crowd, symbolism is far more powerful than words. What is done, symbolism is extremely important. And if it is done properly, if you do the actions correctly, if you make the motions in the correct manner, understanding crowd psychology, you will succeed in having an impact on them. If you do things wrong, the message will come out very, very different. Moshe Rabbeinu was supposed to teach the people of Israel at that moment that you should know. If we have as a nation arrived somewhere, it's not random. If the nation of Israel arrives at a specific location and there's a crisis there, don't think it's random. And then what we need to do is find that supernatural leader who could do something supernatural to save us. Don't view it that way. You should view this crisis as one that, yeah, we were supposed to be here. We were supposed to use our words. Use your words. We tell that, to kids quite often. Use your words, not your hands. Use your words, people of Israel. What are the words that we are supposed to do to achieve our mission? Words of Torah, words of tefillah, words of kindness. Everything's through the mouth. The mouth is there as a tool to deal with circumstances, to deal with an environment that you are there, and it's not a random presence. Anywhere you are in life, and especially if the nation of Israel reaches a specific location, it's not random, and therefore you have to go ahead and figure out something supernatural to get out of it. What you need is to use your words. Use the words of tefillah, use the words of Torah, use the words of Moshe, the mouth of Moshe Rabbeinu. That's what will save you. In other words, view it as a natural course. You were there because you're supposed to be there. You get out of it through your mouth. That's what was supposed to take place at that moment. And this was a very significant moment. This was the moment that they are preparing the end of the years in the wilderness. They are, in essence, they are beginning to settle next to Eretz Yisrael, which becomes Eretz Yisrael, some of it at least. They're supposed to learn that message, that the way you achieve things is believe that you are there for a reason, and believe as well that you can achieve and reach your destination with your words. And if you hold the staff, and you say, I'm not using the staff, I'm not doing some hocus pocus miracle, I'm not doing that. What I'm doing instead is speaking. The impression it would have on the crowd would be tremendous. That the way we achieve things in Judaism is not with hocus pocus, not by going to the great Kabbalist, not by the person who's going to go out and pour lead on your head and go get rid of an Einar, and not that, but through the words of Torah. I have the option. Moshe Rabbeinu was walking around with a staff. Miracles were performed with it. This was the magic that he could do. But God doesn't want us to live off magic. By the way, the wilderness had some magic there. The mud was supernatural. The clouds of glory were supernatural. But now they have to make that adjustment to the new era, to the new land, to the new reality where you could achieve things just with the words, just with talking. Moshe Rabbeinu's words, Torah, Tefillah, that's going to get you to the next step. And when it comes to actions of one person, if I hit this instead of talking to it, I'm fine. But if it's Moshe Rabbeinu having an impact on a crowd, when you are dealing with a crowd, symbolism is extremely significant. It can change the world. It could change the world. In the 1920s, cigarette companies, Philip Morris and others, realized that they have a little bit of an issue. What was their issue? That men were smoking a lot, Baruch Hashem, good for them, they made a parnasa, and it was good for funeral homes as well. And women, on the other hand, were not smoking in public. I mean, women would smoke, were we not? Equal opportunity. We're in a there was one, but only shashtil in the 20s it was not appropriate. And that was a crisis, because if you limit women and their smoking, right, you're going to limit the marketplace. So they needed to have an impact and change, to have some success in their marketing. So they turned to the guru of marketing in the United States, the biggest, the person who invented, in essence, PR. They turned to him and they said to him, how do we change this? So they said, not a problem. So I think it was the Easter parade in the late 20s in New York City. And they had famous models and actresses that were alive then. And they gave them Lucky Strikes. And they labeled it, and this was a marketing release of the parade itself, sponsored by Philip Morris, that the women are going to be walking around with torches of freedom. They're torches of freedom. They're not cigarettes, they're torches. So when you lighten up in public, it's a symbol of freedom. Right? Take a puff, and you're in public, and pictures are taken. This is the parade. Sales shot up, and mission was accomplished indeed. Right? Why? Brilliant marketing and understanding that it's not the words. In other words, they could get up there and darshan, but it's the symbolism. When you deal with crowd psychology, it is what you do quietly at times that has a much greater impact than anything that you could ever say. It was the most brilliant technique. Understanding the same idea, understanding crowd psychology. It is small things, calling it torch of freedom. Striking a rock instead of talking. Because by striking the rock, what did he achieve? People had gone and said, oh, Moshe Rabbeinu did another miracle. Here we go again, the supernatural. God, Moshe has that ability. Hocus pocus, Moshe, we have water. Moshe is great, let's move on. That's not what God wanted. And if they're going to walk around thinking that Moshe Rabbeinu is great, that is not the way to survive in Israel. We can't live like that believing our leaders are magicians. We have to believe that the Word of God is the way we survive. Where we have reached is due to providence, and the way we go ahead and deal with the crisis is with our mouth, the words of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe blew it, in essence. That's what God is telling him. You blew it. You, by hitting the rock, you've just performed another miracle. Speaking would have been a lesson, a message of speech, of words. And you could have, and everyone would have realized that the words of Moshe Rabbeinu, tefillah, Torah, that's how we survive in this new natural reality in the land of Israel. And the crowd was watching, and God told him, it's le'eineihem, that which you are going to perform, it is in front of them. Understanding crowd psychology. So that's the insight of Chacham Barnez, and that was the same idea used by the brilliant mind of Edward Barnez, who was the person who came up with this idea of PR in New York City in the 1920s. A great-grandson of Chacham Barnez was Edward Barnez. You could do a search of Edward Barnez, and he has been called, the founder of public relations. He understood very, very well what crowd psychology is all about. So you find it in the great-grandson with a similar theme. Some say that lots of Edward's insights actually came from his uncle Sigmund Freud, right? That Sigmund Freud married Martha Barnez, and in his office he had a portrait of his wife's grandfather. Not that he exactly agreed with him on everything, but so Freud, who understands how people without doubt think, the subconscious impact, that's the philosophy that was mentioned here. Understand the le'eineihem.
I don't think it makes sense.
Which part?
The whole thing.
Ooh.
Because Moses had ultimate faith. Moshe had ultimate faith in God. And if God said talk to the rock, why would he ignore it when all his life he'd done God's bidding against? So I would postulate another idea, if I may.
Go ahead.
The people, he says le'eineihem. You've got to do this in front of them. And maybe, and you also see that Moshe doesn't complain. When God says to him, you did this instead of that, he doesn't say anything.
Right.
He doesn't plead for himself. He doesn't say, it was a mistake, please let me go. So maybe Moshe was in a way sacrificing himself. Maybe he was accepting the punishment in front of Li'enehem, in front of all these people, to show, all I did was this instead of that. If you think you're going to get into Eretz Israel, imagine with all of your complaining and all the wrong things that you have done, how you have to respond to Hashem if you want to get in. And maybe he was actually doing it on purpose.
So it was like a sacrifice.
And he was saying, all I did was strike the rock instead of talking to it, and I've been denied Eretz Israel. If you don't come around to this way of thinking, you're not going to get there either.
Good insight, good insight. What's original about it is that suddenly you're taking it from a decision that was made consciously to go ahead and do it as a tool of education. That's an interesting insight. Possible. And again, we have the rule of Ayin Panim LaTorah. There's 70 different ways to look at it. And, I would put it within the 70. I don't know if it's in the 50s or 60s, but...
I put it number 1.
Number 1? Good. The reason we have 70 faith is because every person is really different. Panim LaTorah. Like every person, we look differently, we think differently, and each explanation talks to someone else in a different way. Sometimes different years, different explanations talk to you. Hirsch seems to say that if you think about it, this is the same staff. Hirsch takes it that was the staff that he did the miracles in the earlier years. And he felt like 40 years I've been with them, and they're the same complaining people, that it was frustration. Again, there's difficulty with Moshe Rabbeinu, frustration, and we have that difficulty in addition due to the fact that Moshe, whatever he says, the word of God, we struggle with it. Everyone struggles with it. And the rule is that when you have one question with 250 answers, obviously none of them are the ones that you're supposed to feel that is the pure answer. So I think the option is open for coming up with other interpretations. But by the way, there are commentators that know regarding other areas that there are times that people make what are called sins intentionally. In other words, the idea that mekoshesh, remember the person who gathered wood on Shabbos? So there's a rabbinic tradition that he did it intentionally. So it's not far-fetched to go ahead and take that generation and analyze their sins as ways of teaching the public. So it's not far-fetched at all. It's a good one. But I'll still stick with what was presented. But it's good. Yes?
Could you say that Moshe's hitting the rock was not a lucky strike?
Moshe hitting those Alex. That's good. Indeed tied in. It's interesting. Yes?
The Moshe hitting after being told to talk to the rock, he comes up there and he's saying that symbolism is everything as a leader. A leader, I know as a teacher, you can never show anger. Okay, he's hitting that twice. Bad mistake.
Yeah.
And as a teacher, you show an ounce of anger.
You blew it, yeah.
You blew it.
Rambam takes that approach. Rambam focuses specifically on his anger. Rambam says that the issue was anger. And that's coming from that idea
and it
that
wasn't about him.
Correct.
It was about
the interaction, how he dealt with them. The anger was the key. The anger, and he calls them morim. He starts calling them names. That's when you blow. The educator loses it all. That's the approach of the Rambam. It's magnificent, the portion, because it's complex. We don't have answers in the text. We have tradition. Everyone should go ahead and run with an approach that they feel comfortable with. But nevertheless, I was able to share with you an insight from Chacham Barnez. He called himself Chacham Barnez at that time because in the 1840s, there was the development of the Reform movement. So you had people that did not agree completely with the tradition and titled themselves rabbi, so he understood public relations, that he has to have a title that is different than everyone else. So he called himself Chacham Barnez, despite the fact that he was an Ashkenazi. A brilliant man in public relations, and it's fascinating that psychology, and to do your Google search on Edward Bernays, and you realize how much his contribution has been to the greatness of our consuming civilization. Thank you so much. I will not be here next week, Bezrat Hashem. There is no class next week, but we'll see you the week after that. Parashat Pinchas will be back. No class this week. Thank you. Good day.